All right, so hi everyone. Welcome to our very first meeting of the year for the Product Guild. As many of you already know, Anna and I, we started this kind of grassroots community last year. It's picked up a lot of attention and speed over this last year, and we've been able to do a lot of cool product events. This first session of this year is going to be actually an external speaker. So we're lucky to have Devansh here provide some insights on the product discovery process based on some of his own experiences. He's going to be focusing on specifically the jobs to be done and the user story mapping frameworks. I'm sure this will be a very fruitful discussion. Feel free to add your questions in the chat throughout the discussion, and Anna and I will be fielding those questions with Devansh. So a little bit about kind of how this session came to be. I'm currently taking part in a product fellowship, and I had the chance to meet Devansh through that fellowship, and I had asked him if he would do a talk for us based on some of these aspects of the product discovery process as we're going to go through. And he was very kind to say yes, so I'm looking forward to the insights and recommendations that he provides to the team. So Devansh, over to you.
Mansi, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so a little bit maybe just about myself before we start. So I used to be based in Toronto and so have lived in Canada for a number of years, maybe like many of you. Used to work at Accenture and so have some kind of exposure to consulting life as well. I've been an engineer and a PM. I have been on a founding journey for the last year. So currently working on No Karoshi, which is an incubator. And what I really kind of care about is, you know, bringing these kind of awesome product techniques and reducing the amount of time that we spend building features that people don't use. And, just sharing that knowledge is something I care a lot about. I guess that's what brings me here today. Um, so just for the agenda for this call, we're going to talk a little bit about objectives and what you're going to learn, and maybe hopefully how that's going to help you in your engagements and with your clients. Then we'll talk about why these two specific tools. Why did I talk about jobs to be done and user story mapping? Then we'll go through them and understand more about them, what they are, when to use them, all that stuff. There's some bonus materials at the end, which is basically an excuse for me to watch Mad Men and talk about it. So there's a video there. I understand WebEx doesn't do video really well. But there'll be a link and you can watch it, if you're interested. And there's some exercises that we're going to do as we do the kind of thing. There's examples in the middle. There is allocated time for questions, but if you have questions in the middle, just feel free to stop me. It is kind of sequential, so it'll be nice if kind of everyone's on board as we're going through. So questions anytime are welcome. Okay, awesome. Oh, cool. You can see the chat pop up, which isn't there in Zoom. Okay, so objectives. Yeah, there's two things that we're going to talk about. There's product discovery, there's jobs to be done, and user story mapping. They both pertain to discovery, but then I thought about it, and actually user story mapping does a little bit more as well. And we'll talk about why. I think these two tools kind of do the very basics. One is like figure out what people want, and the other one is figure out how to build it. So that's why I think they just work really well together in the context of prioritization, which sometimes feels like the only product job is figure out what to build and which one to build first and what to focus on first. And the reason there's a big garbage can here is so that lest we forget that a large part of our jobs is often to not build stuff that's not going to be useful for the user. So that's the context in which these two tools become relevant. So the goal is by the end of it, you know what it is, how to use it, when to use it. And so hopefully there's kind of this practical ability that you take away. And then also for later, you understand why it helps. What are the basic kind of principles at play that make these tools effective, and where you can go to learn more. And so you can kind of deepen your understanding and play around with it, because they are very versatile and kind of fundamental, foundational tools. So hopefully that's clear. Yeah, why are we talking about these two things? So I guess the goal as kind of product people, right, is this is like a Marty Kagan quote. He's written this book called Inspired, which is like wonderful and a great starting point for product knowledge. And he says that your job is to build products that add genuine value to people's lives in a way that works for the business, right? And so kind of what are the steps? Let's assume that that's the goal here. What are the steps we need to take to get there? The first one is kind of understand what the user wants and needs. Without that, it's really hard to craft anything for them. Figure out what's going to work for them. And this is kind of the more traditional product discovery process. Do a bunch of iterations, try different ideas, see what works, how the customers react to it, make that thing available for them. So first is figure out what to build. The second thing is actually build it, download it, make it available in the App Store and that kind of stuff. Then have them use that thing, and then hopefully at the end of that whole flow, you make some money for the business. So this is a good illustration of how user story mapping and jobs to be done is a really basic kind of tool, because that's what this is, right? This slide is your job to be done on the top left, and user story mapping on the right. So you can break this down into delivery, discovery, acquisition, monetization. This is not some formal framework. I just kind of made this up. But jobs to be done is useful because it's the very beginning. It helps us understand what the user wants and needs. User story mapping is the first step in the kind of prototype and design phase process. In order to figure out what the experience should look like, you need to first understand what it's going to be. And it's also very useful for delivery, which is why I also added it there. But these are kind of the first few steps you'll want to take as you go down this journey. So I can't see everyone's face. I don't know how to use gallery view in WebEx, but hopefully this is making sense. And okay, let's keep going. Please interrupt me with questions. When I talk a lot, then yeah. Oh, awesome. I like the thumbs up. Thanks for that. Yeah. So the first framework we're going to talk about is jobs to be done. So what is it? There's an official definition, and you can go Google it. I read it, I had it on the slide. It didn't actually make a lot of sense to me. So I was like, let me just add my definition. So my definition of jobs to be done is it's the approach of understanding the user's needs and feelings as the first step in creating a solution for them, often by asking, what job is the user trying to do here? And so what you're trying to do is, take off your own glasses and put on the glasses and look at the world from the point of view of the user and understand what is it that's really driving them to do whatever, to potentially come and use your product, right? That's all it is. It's what is the user really trying to do here is the question that you keep asking. And that's pretty much all jobs to be done is. It sounds really simple, but it's really, really powerful. So let's talk about some, stories in which it's worked really well. So jobs to be done was figured out by these three people, and one of them has this really nice presentation, which is linked here, which you can watch later. And essentially, they were hired to go and make milkshakes better for some kind of fast food chain. Okay, and so how would the fast food chain do it? They'd normally call in a support group, like a focus group. They'd ask them, "How do you want your milkshakes? Do you want them chocolatier, chunkier? Do you want them bigger, smaller? How do you want them?" And then they'd get a bunch of feedback from the users, and then they do it, and then sales would go nowhere. And so now these consultants went in and they tried to figure out when people were like, who are the actual people who are buying milkshakes, right? And they figured out that 50% of milkshakes are sold before 8 a.m. They're often sold to people who are solo, so they come in, buy the milkshake, and then leave the premises. And it's mostly adults, right? And so they're like, okay, this seems like an interesting pattern. Let's follow this. Like, what's going on here? And so they asked people who are buying these milkshakes, like, essentially, what job are you hiring this milkshake to do? And the answer came back, okay, we have a long commute. We have like a 20, 30, 40-minute drive in the morning. And I'm kind of bored on that drive, right? Like, I don't really have a lot to do. I'm just sitting in traffic. I have one hand free. And by the time I get to the office, I'm kind of hungry, right? And so, and then the other question that the consultants asked was, who else have you hired to do this job? And why did that work or not work? And so the response came back, oh, we hired a banana, but that didn't work. Like, I was like hungry by 7:30 again. I hired like a donut, but I got sugar all over my face. It's like crumbed. So that didn't work for me. I tried a bagel, but you have to like, hold it between your knees to get like your jam or cream cheese on it. That didn't work. And so what they were able to discover is there were two jobs that they were hiring this milkshake to do. One was to entertain them and just give them something to do while they drove. And the other one was to make them kind of full, so they're not hungry by the time they get there, right? And by interrogating what else they had hired to potentially do this job, they could figure out what parameters were important for the user, what their needs were, and what could make a potentially more successful milkshake. So now that you know that your job is to entertain and kind of satisfy, you can easily make more product improvements, right? Like, so you can imagine that the user is kind of fairly rushed when they're coming for the milkshake. Can you make sure the machines are never broken? I found so many memes about like broken McDonald's milkshake machines while I was looking for these images. So don't break your machines, right? Have maybe pre-orders. Maybe make the cup easier to hold, something like that. Like once you understand what job the user's trying to do, you understand what parameters they're judging your solution on, and then it becomes much easier rather than saying, "Oh, what would you like this to be?" in an arbitrary sense. So that's the classic example. One from my life was um, I was working with a company and financial services company, and we realized one engineer was just spending all their time writing reports, and those reports were never being run. Okay, so I was like, okay, that seems kind of weird. We have this one engineer, all they're doing is writing reports, nobody's using them. What's happening here? So it turns out there's one executive who's asking for a lot of these reports and getting really frustrated because it would take a week for the report to make it into production so they could run it on the portal, right? And so then I was like, okay, basically, hey, executive, what job are you trying to do here? And what it turned out was that there was a monthly meeting of leadership, and this executive needed to present some numbers there. And often at that meeting, leadership would ask him to change the format of the report. But this person had been so senior that they just hadn't worked with Excel in a long time. And so they were just doing what they were used to doing, which is asking someone on their team to make the report for them. Uh, the problem was the engineer didn't realize this context and didn't know how to use Excel, ironically enough. And so was going and like writing these huge templatized reports, which was taking everybody's like too much time. The executive wasn't getting his reports on time. And so once you understood really, okay, you just need someone to change the columns. Now we can write a macro for you. And whenever you need new numbers, we can send them to you right away. So just like a really small example of how understanding the real job to be done allows you to craft a better kind of, experience for the user. All right. Can I get thumbs up, thumbs down? Make sense? Some kind of smiles, nods. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So how do you use jobs to be done? I don't know if you guys have seen, the Simpsons movie, or you know about what's going to happen next in that scene. Um, so how to use it? There are basically three questions that you need to ask, okay? Or three questions that are really good to ask. One is competing solutions. Again, in the milkshake example, when you think of competing solutions, you'll understand what are the parameters that are important to the user. What else are they hiring? Who else are they hiring to do it? So one example is like maybe changing price on the milkshake wouldn't work because let's say the competitors were like, a competitor's milkshake, then maybe there's price sensitivity. But here, like the alternative is like a bagel. So your price probably doesn't have a lot to do with it. So just understanding competing solutions will get you a bit better framing of what's important to the user. So that's a good way. Um, the first thought thing, yeah. So this one is really interesting. So you basically want to ask the user, what was the first time that you thought about ordering this thing or buying this thing or hiring a solution here? Because what often happens is the user will have some kind of need, okay, and then they'll stick with that need for a little while, and at some point they'll come up with a solution in their head, and then they'll go out and look for that solution. So I'm hungry, okay, whatever, I'm gonna wait a little bit of time, and now I'm at McDonald's, and now I need to pick something. So you don't want to ask them, why did you buy the milkshake and not the burger? What you want to understand is where was the genesis of this thought, and that'll give you a lot more context around maybe what the real problem is. So just walking the user back to when was the first time you thought about hiring something for the solution is a really powerful way to surface these kind of hidden things. Broader context, generally, like, how is the user feeling? Are there other stakeholders? So in the milkshake example, there's no other stakeholders involved, right? But they're probably super hungry. There is external stakeholder in that maybe they have a boss and they need to get to work on time. What's the stuff that's happening around? So you want to dig down and then dig around as well, to understand kind of what's important to the user, what feelings are there. One really kind of neat thing is to follow any strong feelings, positive or negative. Strong feelings are a sign that there's some kind of need being surfaced there. And the stronger they are, the more basic and kind of, high demand the need is. There's one really good example from a Google design sprint where they were trying to help a company have good meetings with senior leadership who would quit following the appointment of a new CEO. So a new CEO would get appointed for each country in this company, and then all the senior leadership would quit in that country because they knew they couldn't become CEO. And so this company is trying to figure out, how do we actually have that conversation so that people don't quit? So they, did the whole design sprint stuff. If you haven't read Design Sprint, by the way, it's by Jason Knapp or something like that. It's a fantastic book. If you want to talk about like just discovery, like that's really, really good. So really recommend that book. I think it's in the slide below. Yeah, so they were trying to figure out, so they came up with a bunch of solutions, they ran those solutions, and then none of them had a good outcome. And essentially, people were kind of sad that, oh, we couldn't find a solution that worked. But then the facilitator was like, okay, tell me about rooms or tell me about situations where there were really strong feelings coming up. Like even negative is fine, but it shows that something that's really important to the person is being surfaced and it's not being met in that context, but that need doesn't change. And so follow strong feelings wherever they are. And in the Madman example, you'll see the users doing these, giving out these hints of things that they're feeling very strongly, and those are kind of interesting things to dig into. Yeah, how to use it? If you do this, and okay, there's a question. How do you ask a user about their first thought? What would you phrase that as a user interview question? Yeah, great question. Can we hang on to this and come back to this maybe towards the end of the jobs to be done? So I'll try to keep that in mind. In companies, jobs to be done are frequently captured as customer problem statements. Opportunities are the same thing. It's basically some kind of unmet need. Sometimes companies will have theme-based roadmaps. So there are different ways in which different organizations will call these things. But just in general, remember, like, what is the basic need of the user? And yeah, you can capture it as customer problem statements if you want to kind of institutionalize the knowledge as well. And that's how you use it. When do you use it? There's a good and a bad time to use most tools. In general, for jobs to be done, it's when you're trying to understand where the user is coming from. If the user is doing something that you don't really understand, that's a good sign that this might be the right time for this tool. So if you're developing a new product, by definition, you don't really know what the users are doing. And so develop a good understanding, you can use it. When users are not using your product, really great time. And when people are misusing your product, that's really good. Because clearly they've discovered like they're telling you, hey, we have this need that a product kind of fills, but not really. And now we can actually go and understand why they're trying to use it and make it better. There's a really good article by the CEO of Superhuman, and where he talks about how they double down on the segment of users that was really working for them. And so they didn't actually know that CEOs are their kind of, ideal customer profile. But when they saw who was using the product and where, they were able to kind of figure out what job they were accomplishing, which was basically like, getting to inbox zero really, really quickly. And so when people misuse your product or you see random things in your product that you weren't expecting, try to pull this out and see if it gives you a more detailed understanding of what's going on. Okay. Does anyone have any questions, anything to say? Anything? Anyone? Right. Okay.
I have a
I think,
quick question, Devansh. If you go back to the last slide, you provide really good examples of when you should use jobs to be done. I'm curious, would you ever use the jobs to be done framework when people are using your product properly, but you want to find maybe optimal ways of using that product or changing the journey? Would you ever kind of use it as a way to improve what they're doing?
yeah,
Yeah, if that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, it depends on your definition of properly, right? For me, like properly would be everybody in the world is using a product all the time, in which case you maybe don't need it.
Mhm.
But there's always, yeah, I think it's nice when there's some friction somewhere. If everything's going swimmingly well, then just like sit on the beach and enjoy your like martini or whatever. But I would think about it more when there's some kind of behavior that you don't understand. And so if people are using it really well, but you built a really shit product, then yes, then figure out why are they using the shit product. There's some like horrible need here that no one else is meeting. But if you build a really nice product and everyone's behaving as as you expect, then it's totally fine. Like if Gabrielle right now, started like went on mute and started like saying something really like big, then I'd be like, okay, like something's wrong. There's some need that Gabrielle has that's not being met right now. But he's silent, he's sitting, like I assume everything's okay. I don't need to dig into what he's feeling or needing right now. Yeah. Oh, you can use this anywhere. So when you have a consulting engagement, like go and try to figure out what is the job to be done for your stakeholder, right? Sometimes, I mean, there are people who just want to like get their next promotion, and so they hire consultants to come and like blow the metric out of the water for like the next quarter. Somebody else may have a really long-term view. Somebody else may just want to cover their ass and use you as an excuse. So just like try and understand what is the real need that even your stakeholders have. And this can be used in like any kind of context. It's like if people are like, try to understand what people really want before you can help them get it. Yeah, I think this is maybe the last example. This is a really fascinating one. This is from the Harvard Business Review article, also in the description. Also, if your stakeholders ask you why you're using jobs to be done, send them the Harvard Business Review article, and then they'll be happy. So that's a pro tip. Yeah, housing development company. There was this company that was trying to sell condos to retirees, and people were just not buying condos in the way that the company had expected. And they're like, okay, users are not behaving the way we want. What's going on here? So we tried to talk to interviews who didn't buy the housing. They were random. There was no like clear demographic, indicator of why people are buying or not. But then they talked to people who did buy, and they were like, trying to walk them back to like what was going on in your head as you're making this decision. And one thing that surfaced was once people knew what to do with their dining table, they became a lot more open to making the purchase decision. So they're like, oh, once I figured out I knew what to do with that, then I was good. Okay. And so they're like, okay, this seems strange. Like, what does the dining table have to do with buying a new home, right? Which is like this huge commitment. And dining table is like this little thing. But then they realized that a lot of people were downsizing from kind of big homes, right? And so they were having to give away a lot of things. They were like adjusting to this new phase of life. And dining tables are especially emotionally charged. You've had Thanksgiving around them. You have like all these memories with your family. And so maybe you don't want to just like give it to Goodwill. Maybe you don't want some stranger to get it, right? And so your options are either you like another family member takes it or it fits into your home. And if neither of those two things happen, then the alternative is not buying like a bigger condo. It's actually just not moving at that moment, right? Um, and so what the company realized was they were in the job they were being hired to do was to help people transition into a new phase of life where they no longer had this big home, but had this small apartment and just like a different life. And so with this understanding, what the condo company did was they added a sorting room. So I move into the place and I don't know, haven't figured out what to do with all my stuff. Just have a big room that's available for me. And then I can bring all my stuff, put it there, and then figure out whether to give it away or where it goes in my new home, or what I want to do with it. And for the dining table, they gave 2 years of free storage. They tried to make the dimension, like whatever the design of the condo, so that more dining tables could, fit. But basically, they understood that we're helping people kind of transition, and how now, given that there's anxiety around what do I do with my stuff? Will my stuff fit in my apartment? Where am I going to keep all my stuff as I sort through it? Because obviously, it's an emotional experience to like throw away all your belongings or get rid of them. And so now they were able to cater to them much better, and it led to like lots of sales, and they covered the cost of offering these extra perks. So just another example of how key it is to know exactly why you're being hired. I wanted to put the Arrested Development house here, but I was like, it won't make sense. Okay. Oh, yeah. So this is another one of how you can um, use jobs to be done in a way that already most companies are doing. Hopefully, lots of people are doing, thinking about users. They have user personas. So maybe let's think about Nicole as someone who uses Uber, right? If we wanted to kind of do some kind of demographic user persona, or Nicole is maybe like a consultant. She lives in Toronto, whatever, some kind of other demographic things. And now we know all about Nicole, and now let's go and craft like a good product for her, right? But the reality is the same person can have different jobs from the same product at different times. And so really refining, so I'm not saying throw user personas away, but just to say that if you only use user personas, you're making an assumption that someone of a given kind of user persona has only one job to be done. But this is not the case, right? For example, with Uber, I've used Uber in all these three situations, and I can tell you my needs were really, really different, right? There was once I was late for this job interview, and I need to get there really quickly. And all I wanted was like, just get the Uber here right now, take me straight to the job interview. Don't talk to me. Like, don't miss any red lights. Like, don't miss any exits. Okay. Like, that was my need. Coming back from wine country at some point, it's like, oh, it'd be nice if we had like, that was more indulgence, right? Like, it's part of the experience. You want like a nice car, maybe you want some music, you want a really good DJ as your driver. And so very, very different needs. I'm open to being taken around. Like, I want to see the city lights, like very different experience, right? And lastly, when you go to a city, like a new city, I just want to like drive around that city. If I'm taking like I always used to take like shared, like whatever, the Uber pool, because they would just drive you around the city on the highways and you get to see so much of it, and it's like practically free, right? So very different kind of jobs to be done, very different needs and feelings around these three experiences. And so one thing I would suggest, or one thing you can do, is really use this framework to refine your personas, understand, and actually if you group people by job to be done, I found it sometimes more effective, because more, if I'm 40 and living in Delhi, and someone else is like 25 and living in Toronto, but we both need to get to the job interview, our needs are probably similar, more similar than maybe my need from that time to coming back from like a party or something. So yeah, refine user personas with jobs to be done. It's really, really cool. It can provide a lot of interesting insight. Okay, I'm assuming I have everyone with me though. It's hard to see, but okay, nods, awesome. Thank you for that feedback. All right, this is a very kind of practical example of how you can use jobs to be done. There's this fantastic thing called growth.design, which is this UX channel. They're based out of Montreal. And so here what they're suggesting is, and I've used this in a bunch of products now myself, is just ask the user why they've come to hire you. Just make that the first step. I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was doing their onboarding and giving them design feedback. And I'm like, why are you asking me all these questions? You're asking me where I live. You're asking me like what I kind of like. You've asked me like 10 onboarding questions. It seems kind of creepy to me. And then I was like, okay, but as a solution, just ask what job to be done are you trying to, like, why am I here as a user, right? And so that does a few nice things. Firstly, tells me what kind of jobs you can help me with. And then if I click one of those jobs, I know you're asking me these questions because you're trying to help me do that job. And also the other thing is really nice. Even if you have someone who signs up but then drops off during your onboarding, by asking about other, you're actually soliciting what job are you asking them to do. So this is a really kind of neat way, and look out for this in apps. When people ask you like, why have you come here? What they're trying to do is to get you to just tell them what the job to be done is. So that's a really, really powerful kind of tool you can use to also just make this very, not only in the discovery process, but even in the context of an app that's running and just constantly trying to figure out why users are coming here. And read the slide later. The thing is in the description. It's quite nice. How does it help? Okay. Oh wait, I have slides here. Right, success. So if you don't know what success looks like, it's incredibly hard to get your users there. Frequently you want to actually peg your KPI to what user success looks like. Something like, number of cab rides arranged, number of dates gone on if you're some kind of dating app. How, like, was I able to file my taxes if I'm into it? So just understanding what success looks like is really important. And obviously without that, you can't help your users get to success. The second one is, you have a greater ability to play within the solution space. So these are two examples. Wow, I'm really doubling down on Uber today. These are two examples of kind of a product that's available at the same time to potentially the same set of people. But you have very different needs and jobs if you hire a line versus if you hire a helicopter, right? But if you understand the job to be done, you can be really kind of creative in how you, what kind of solutions you provide to do that, because solutions and jobs to be done kind of live in separate realms, right? And the last thing is that actually jobs to be done, jobs to be done don't change that much. The need to be somewhere at a certain time is something that's always been there and will always continue to be there. But the need to be entertained while on the move went from Walkman to Discman to iPod to whatever, like a watch and a headphone now. So solutions will change, but needs often will not. And so just being really keyed in on what the need is is really helpful because you can build like a longer term business by understanding the true needs that won't change over time. Okay, we're almost done with this. I've been talking a lot. I want to stop after this, and I want to ask you guys to ask me questions. Um, why does jobs to be done help? Like, what is the basic? What are the basic like truths that make jobs to be done effective, right? So firstly, I love that tools that have like, things built into them. Like you don't even understand why, but they've kind of constrained the conversation to, oh, your job is to understand what the user's needs and feelings are. And so just by anchoring very strongly on what the user is trying to do, it's already providing you this huge advantage, right? You can't stray from, caring about the stakeholder suddenly. So it just focuses you very kind of strongly towards the most basic drivers for user behavior. And feelings and needs are the base of all behavior. The reason we do anything is to like meet some kind of need we have. And the better you can understand those drivers, the more effectively you can help. Yeah. And so these are the kind of needs, they're basic needs. They don't really change over time. And that's what makes everyone work. And that's what also makes this framework so applicable, right? You can use this with your clients, with your end users. You can use this kind of even with friendships, personal life, like just understanding what people really are needing at that moment is really kind of key if you want to help them get there in a very abstract sense. Don't you love this animation? This is new for me. I discovered Keynote recently. But yeah. If in doubt about user behavior, ask what job is the user trying to do? What are they really needing here? Like, what's the context? Why are they hiring the solution? Just keep asking that question, and hopefully that'll be a good way to. It's a very simple kind of thing, right? It's a very simple idea, and this is a simple tool that you can use to make sure that you kind of understand it well. Questions. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Do people have questions? There was one question, but I need to find the chat.
Yeah, let's circle back. How
Yeah.
would you ask a user about their first thought? How would you phrase it in a user interview, for example?
Okay, Anna, can you tell me something about something that you bought recently, maybe?
I bought face cream.
Okay. Maybe let's pick something a little less personal. I think it'd be like more
I
complex.
bought a coffee at Starbucks yesterday,
Okay. And so what time was it?
like 9 p.m.
Okay. And were you by yourself?
No, I was with my husband.
Okay. And then did you walk to the Starbucks? Did you drive to the Starbucks?
I drove there.
Okay. And so what was happening before you drove there? Did you go to work yesterday?
I actually went to go eat something,
Okay.
and Starbucks was right beside, and we thought, let's go grab one.
Okay. And so I guess like what did you eat for dinner? Was it like Italian? Was it Asian? Like,
It was a burger.
it was a burger. Okay. Were you pretty full after you ate that?
Uh, Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. And were you feeling tired at all as well?
Yes.
Okay. So that could be one like very simple example, right? Like you were at this place, you had eaten, you were feeling like a little bit lethargic, and you're like, oh, it would be nice to have some kind of pick me up now. And then so that would be the first maybe moment. It's hard here in this example because the coffee place was right next door. Like, if you had driven to the Starbucks, then I would have asked, oh, what were you doing before that? Were you kind of bored with your, like, maybe you're working on some kind of presentation, right? Were you kind of bored with that? And so maybe the job to be done would have been some kind of entertainment. In which case the solution is not only that you went and bought a coffee, it's also that you went for a drive or a walk and got outside your house. So just like follow the user back, try to understand what was happening in the day, and just ask questions around that. Can be super helpful.
And would you open it? I think, and Nicole, maybe you can jump in here if you'd like, but I think the question was more like, how do you open that conversation, right? Like, do you start with, what's like, if we're thinking more of in a consultative way, right? We're coming in because a client has either provided a solution that they think is going to solve one of their problems, or they don't know yet what that solution is. I mean, there's other reasons, but those are like kind of general ones. So when we're trying to kind of go through the discovery phase, how would you open up like the conversation to get into jobs to be done? Like I like the little demo we did, but like how does one kind of dive into it? I think
Okay.
I'm curious about. I don't know, Nicole, if that was the intent of your question, but
Yeah, exactly. But I think what I took from that demo just now is that you really have to get into a specific scenario and get your client to walk you through like, okay, so the last time you did this, walk me through the steps and like get to those specifics.
Exactly. So there's a really good book on this called The Mom Test. Sorry, I'm gonna overload you with resources, but it's really good. Essentially, what you want to do is anchor. You don't want to ask like, oh, hey, Anna, would you or Nicole, would you use this kind of solution if I provide it to you? It's so easy for you to say yes. Instead, what you want to do is dig into a previous example, because it's a lot harder to like, like there's some objective kind of truth there. So that'll give you a lot more. And basically people's words are worth not much, their behavior is worth a lot. That'll tell you a lot about what their real needs are. And so definitely like anchoring on when was the last time that you experienced this problem, is a really good way to start that conversation. um, and then just ask contextual questions. One thing that you're trying to do is guess what the user's feeling and needing, and so that will actually inform the kind of questions that you ask them. um, my vocabulary for feelings and needs was really bad, and actually recently read this book called Nonviolent Communication, which was just beautiful. And there's actually a list of needs and feelings down in the description below. So figure out, like, you can keep digging till you come down to some basic need. Is a good sign that you read somewhere. But yeah, start the conversation by asking, when was the last time you felt this? That's a good way to just have that first thing, first step. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. And great demo.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Thumbs up if jobs to be done makes sense to you. Or there's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Great presentation, Divinish here. So this is Noor. My question is more, so we're very focused on the solution. So we know what the solution is. And often as consultant, when we're brought in and the client thinks they know what the solution is, often when we start asking those questions, it may not be the right solution. So my question is, well, I don't know if it's like it has to do with this, but when we're thinking about jobs to be done and we realize once we start digging, well, that might not be the product that they're looking to build, a solution we're building for them might not be the right thing once we truly understand the needs. And I'm just trying to see like what are some of the best practices, like to try to shift, because a lot of times like for us it's about convincing them, bringing them back to like, well, this is what we should be building because it answers more your needs. I'm just trying to see how to tie this back instead of just it being jobs to be done about a solution focus, but more jobs to be done once we truly understand a problem.
Right. So if I understood your question, you're saying, or tell me if I have the right understanding. You go to a client, they already have a solution in place. They're like, oh, this is what we want to build.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, this is probably not the right solution. But then they're like, no, this is the solution. Is that
Yeah,
what's happening?
oftentimes, yeah, because oftentimes either it was already sold as this is the solution we're building, and then the teams comes and they want to do discovery. And once you do the discovery, it's like, ooh, we sold this, but maybe that's not the right thing. Let's start shifting a bit more. And that happens quite a bit.
How do you know the discovery isn't working? Like, what is telling you the discovery isn't working?
Well, it's once we start asking the questions, we realize what the needs are, and those are not the right. Like what we sold doesn't really fit, and sometimes we have to make it fit because that's what was sold, and we're not able to change it. So I'm just trying to think, like, yes, I know we can do discovery ahead, and that's what we really try to do, but often it's not the case. Often, like a team is brought in, and this is the idea they have in place, and you try to make it work. I'm just trying to see how to make that alignment afterwards.
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, I love how it's the answer is jobs to be done, right? Like why, like where is that resistance from the client coming from? Is it that they have committed to kind of their external, like maybe their MD or something, that, oh, we're going to deliver this by this date, and so they don't actually have a choice, like they have some kind of external like requirement? Or are they just like, they don't trust you and they're like, hey, like a consultant, just shut up and do what I told you to do. Don't use your brain more than I asked you to do, which happens sometimes, right? But so you want to understand, like, why, what is the nature of the objection? What did they hire you to do? Did they just hire you to execute a project? If really all they care about, maybe the person who you're dealing with, they have like a thing, and all they have to do is deliver this and they get a huge bonus, right? There's almost nothing you could do that could convince them to change, right? So you need to first understand why your stakeholders behaving that way. And then that will really inform your strategy. Generally, hopefully people are not like that. Showing data, like being like, oh, we talk to the user and this is not what they want. I don't really care. Okay. Make a prototype of exactly what the client wanted, and then film users trying to use it, and then film their reactions. And then that'll be a lot stronger proof. And actually, that's the only way to know if users are going to like something, is to get them to go there, click it, and then don't ask them did they like it. Look at the look on their face. Like if they're like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like look for behavior, not for words necessarily, right? So that becomes very, very powerful proof. It's like, okay, here's like, this is what your solution is going to look like in 6 weeks or 6 months, right? Here we have a user using it today and they hate it. Do you still want us to build this? And if they do, then maybe you do that. But yeah, so it really depends. You can have more powerful and convincing data than I had a feeling by speaking to this user that they won't like this. That does seem like kind of weak proof. So just go ahead, do the next sprint, the next prototype thing, and then you'll have much more real data. Send them Harvard Business Review articles. They'll be like, oh my God, like you know what you're talking about, and there's a lot of credibility that comes with that. So tell them to try and test the technique, and it would be beneficial to us to. And again, actually, like if you figure out what the job to be done is, do you want user adoption or do you just want to get this out? If you want user adoption, like this is what I think makes sense, and then have the conversation there. So yeah, understanding before trying to convince someone of some kind of course of action is really key. Yeah.
No, makes a lot of sense. I do agree with the prototype. I think what we struggle with a lot of time is even when we want to put a prototype, when we talk with our developers, engineer, even like just the UX team, it's like, ooh, 3 months out to put the prototype, and then you're investing 3 months to get to something. I'm like, no, I just want a simple prototype, just to prove a point. So I think it's just finding that right balance. That's a good way to look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, the problem there is you're taking 3 months to build a prototype, right? Like a prototype should take like 1 or 2 days ideally. And again, the design sprint is so good, that design sprint book. It'll have everything for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Thank you for the engagement, by the way. It's much nicer when I know people are listening and care about what I'm saying.
Quick time check, actually. We're at 15 minutes left, Devansh. Do you want to jump to user story mapping?
Yes, let's do it quickly. All right. User story mapping. Time flies when you're having fun. User story mapping, what is it? There's some official definition. My own definition is it's a flowchart that visually describes how a user moves through an experience. And so we were actually going to do an exercise here. That's why this picture. I assume you can still see my screen. So we're going to skip the exercise a little bit, and I was doing this for practice yesterday. And so we're just going to see that. So I picked something really, really simple, which is like, what's an email flow? The user logs in, signs up for an email. Like, let's say I want to send an email to someone. I sign up, log in, maybe I compose a new email, I send it, and the other person gets it. This is kind of the sequence that happens in order for me as a user to be successful. And these are kind of, some of the things that I need to do as I log in, as I sign up. I need to pick a username, a password, log in, maybe enter these things, compose. I have to like think about these kind of things. Yeah, so this is a user story map. Essentially what you do is you try to figure out which user this is for. What are the logical steps that they're going to take through your product to get the kind of job that they want to be done. And then you go right to left to right in that way. And then underneath, you just fill in details. And these details, in this case, are just what the user will do. They can also be mocks. They can be kind of integrations that are required. They can be legal compliance kind of considerations. You can put whatever details you want. But the essential idea is the user is doing something, you write down their journey, and then you fill it in with kind of details at the bottom. So that's what a user story map is. That's how you use it. Sorry that we couldn't do that exercise. But let's maybe look at some more examples of user story maps, right? This is one that I did in like 15, 20 minutes with a client. It was really useful because, we figured out, oh, there's a habit loop we need to create. And so that's the riskiest part of our whole thing. So maybe we should worry about that a little bit more than we should worry about other things. So user story maps can be really simple and hand-drawn. This is from the design book again. Here they're trying to model how, clinical trial enrollments happen, which if any of you work in medicine, which, you may, it's a really complicated procedure. They managed to break it down into something really, really simple, right? Make appointments, search matches. So you can make it really high level. You can also make it really, really, capturing like a lot of details. So this is from Jeff Patton wrote a book called User Story Mapping and also has a fantastic talk where he talks through the whole book. So this is from that presentation. And so this is the example of a company that had multiple products and they're trying to figure out how they work together. So they can be really complex. They can inform roadmaps. You can take a user story map, split it up into releases, and boom, you have a roadmap. And often you can use jobs to be done. Like the job to be done is what you want at the end of the kind of user story map, right? So that can happen as well. They can be physical. You see the same structure here is what the user is doing across the top, and then details kind of lower down in the flow. So you can add, smaller steps and all this stuff. Yeah, this is a really, really key benefit of user story mapping. They create shared benefits, understanding. So what will happen in a meeting, all right? Or you go to a new client and they throw like tons of documentation at you, and they're like, oh, read this. And maybe sometimes it's new documentation, we all read it, we're like, oh, okay, Devansh is saying some words, we all understand the same words, great, we're done, we can go off and do jobs to be done and use story mapping, right? The problem is that we can read the same words and have different images in our head. But really, when you draw them out, as you do in a user story map, you recognize that, oh, there's differences maybe. And then you work together and talk some more, and then you sort it out. And then when you walk away, you have the same idea in your head. So not only the words that we're using are the same, actually the images in our heads are the same. And that's kind of success here. Does this look familiar at all to you? So it's basically a user story map, right? You can use user story maps to talk about user story maps. Recursive tools are awesome. So talk about something, draw it out, talk about it some more, have a shared understanding. The shared understanding is also your job to be done, right? So it's at the end of your flow, and this is how it all works together. Okay, this is a really quick personal example. So this is a client. They didn't have, kind of a good piece of document that I could see and understand their product. And so there's two phases. There's pre-acquisition, post-acquisition. So we're not worrying about pre-acquisition too much, but you can use jobs to be done there as well, which is what Peggy Olson talks about in that video. Post-acquisition, we're like, okay, let's just map out high level what's going on with your product. So we have lines, we have progress, the user ends here, this is some kind of value. I have screenshots. So this gives you a nice overview of really what's going on, even in the absence of any kind of mocks or specs. It just took like half an hour. You can see there's like some weird flows happening here, like why are there two entry points to things? This might be something to consider. Maybe this thing is all about user discovery, like these three things. So you can group them and be like, oh, discovery is where we're having a big problem. So maybe we should focus on that. So this is an example of, using a story map really, really quickly. Yeah. So they can be used really quickly. When should you use it? Essentially, when you're trying to understand a product, right? Either it can already exist, or you're trying to make it, in which case it hopefully exists in your stakeholder's head. And so, what does that product look like? What does it feel like? What does the user actually do as they go through this product? When you're trying to create shared understanding between teams, it's absolutely fantastic. If you've ever gone and had like tons of documents thrown at you, like here, like, I want to understand your product. Oh, here's like 10 specs that are out of date and 20 pages long and really badly written, and you just want to cry, right? And now what you do is magic. You just get everybody and like, just tell me about your product. Tell me about, what happens when, okay, so the user first logs in, right? And your product is to like connect people so they can go on a date. Okay, great. That's the last step. So now users logged in. Tell me what happens next. Oh, okay. And then you keep going there. And so it becomes much easier. People will often get a better understanding of their own product doing this exercise than by writing these kind of long product specs and things like that. When you're not sure where to start, just make a user story map. You just get a better idea of the product. People will think you're smart because you have this like cool tool, and it'll actually just give you a map of everything that's going on, and then it becomes much easier for you to figure out where you should go and intervene. How to use it? List users on the one end. So the one thing that we looked about, there's only one user. There could be multiple kind of users, as in the design sprint example. Write the end scenario outcome at the end. So what's the job to be done? Then ask questions like, what happens next? Okay, is that all? Is there anything I missed? And then keep saying the story back to them, right? Like, oh, the user signs up, then they enter this, and then they enter this, and then this thing happens. Say the story again and again. And that way, when you're missing things or doing things wrong, people will correct you. Am I missing anything is a great question. Keep it really simple to start. This, like, one of the big judgments you'll have to make when you're doing a user story map interview is to understand where to go deeper into depth and where to keep it simple. I would say just start really simple. Just get like a full story before, and then at the end, you can go to whatever you can. Like I've done like a lot. Like you can go really deep with user story maps. You can put technical things there. Like these are the data models that will be affected. These are the API calls we have to make. These are the partnership things we have to think about in order to make this feature work. It's really, really nice. How does it help create user empathy throughout your team? Again, a hidden feature of user story maps is that the users are at the very center of them. So the likelihood that you'll build something completely irrelevant to your user becomes less. And again, it's hidden, right? Just in the thing. Yeah, so that's so Greg, that's a question I think of just focus in general, and I would say that's a little one step above that, about this stuff. It's kind of where your strategy and stuff comes into play. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm just going. Gain alignment among stakeholders. Oh, what a Jedi mind trick. All right, you have a bunch of stakeholders. They all have a different idea what the product ought to be. All right, you go in and you ask the stakeholder, what do you want this product to be? Okay, and then as they say it, you write it down. Okay, and then you go to your next stakeholder, and they're like, oh, I talked to some people. This is what they said. What do you think? And then as they say it, you write it down. All right. Then you go to the big meeting where all the stakeholders are together, and now everyone has that input into this user story map. Everyone kind of knows what the story is, and magically there's a lot more alignment. There's a lot less pushback, and everyone can really talk about the different things without getting lost in the details, which happens so often in some of these meetings, right? They'll go down this little rabbit hole, but now you have this like nice visual thing to keep everyone on the same page. Another thing about stakeholders, you can do it at any level of detail. So, really high level for your CEO, maybe a lot lower level for other folks. All right, I think that's all the time we have. We're like 3 minutes to end. Why do they work? There's some story about why they work. There's questions, but I think we'll skip those. Putting it together. So now we would have gone back and looked at that same exercise and tried to refine based on that kind of thing. There's a summary, use them both together. They help you uncover and solve user needs. There's a lot more to learn as well. Yeah, this is a link that, take a look if you're interested. This is how you can use jobs to be done, even in the context of user acquisition. This is really, like, if you're at all on the marketing side, there's a really good article called Finding Language Market Fit by First Round, which speaks to this as well. So what you're really trying to do is solve some need for them, not provide them a bunch of solutions or features. These are all the links. And yeah, this is, if you want to use me as a link, then that's an option too. Mansi, back to you. Do we have, I don't know, thoughts on what to do next, how you want to proceed here? I'm happy to do some questions. I don't have 10 o'clock, but I'm guessing folks have to get back to work.
Any additional questions, team? Just on the user story mapping. I know we had some good discussion in the chat, but yeah, I see we've got one. What are some important KPIs to track to understand whether we've succeeded in creating a product that solves our users' needs?
I mean, just how many times, so it depends on the nature of your business. There's again a really good first round article about this, but let's say you're some kind of SaaS, right? Just focus on what does success for your user look like? Like, let's say I have a flow that leads to, I mean, filing tax is a bad example because it only happens once a year, but let's say, I have some kind of service that helps you pay your monthly credit card bill. So how many are we getting one? Or let's talk about Uber. How many cab rides am I enabling for people, right? That could be one really good KPI, because the whole value is for you to enable a person to get from place A to place B. So how many times were you able to successfully make that happen? Might be a good KPI. You can track it kind of on an individual basis. How many times are we helping this person get to, this thing? Is that falling off? Is that going up? Are we completing all of our rides? How many canceled rides do we have? Is potentially a good one. But yeah, in general, yeah, there's this whole thing about outcome impact and output outcome impact. So you want to basically like do KPIs that are important to your user and to your business. So things like, how are we helping users is the output one. The impacts one would be, how many total users do we have, total kind of revenue. But yeah, just directly measure how you're adding value to the user is normally hard to go wrong.
Well, no, we're just at the top of the hour here. I mean, I want to just extend my thanks for coming on, talking to us about these two really important topics. I think it was a really great discussion, great presentation. Really, truly appreciate your time. Hopefully, we'll have you back at some point. And for the team, there will be a replay, and we will also be sharing the materials that Devansh was so nice enough to put together for us. And as mentioned, I mean, he shared all of his contact information, so feel free to reach out to him directly, or if you have questions that you'd like to ask him, we're happy to pass that along. So thanks so much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for attending, participating. Great discussion, team.
Thanks,
Anna.
everyone.
Thanks.
Have a
Thanks,
great rest of
everybody.
your Thursday.